Nellie Bly is one of America's greatest journalists, but Nellie Bly was only a pen name. The woman behind the name was Elizabeth Jane Cochran. She was born May 5th, 1864, to Michael and Mary Jane Cochran. She had 14 siblings. From a young age, Elizabeth liked to stand out. She wore pink to do so. She eventually earned herself the nickname Pink. While she was still young, her father passed away suddenly in 1870. Her mother eventually remarried to Jackson Ford. Jackson Ford proved to be an abusive drunk, and Mary Jane later divorced him in 1878. Elizabeth testified on behalf of her mother in her divorce hearing. At age 15, Elizabeth would go to school at Indiana Normal School to become a teacher. She was a very talented writer, but would only attend for one term, running out of money for tuition. Later, she would return home. In the Pittsburgh Dispatch, writer Ermos Wilson, known to Dispatch writers' quiet observer, claimed that women were best left at home, performing duties like raising children, cooking, and cleaning. He went so far as to describe the working woman as a monstrosity. Unimpressed, Elizabeth wrote a response to the editorial piece, and it was later published. At 18 years old, she had grabbed the attention of the managing editor at the Pittsburgh Dispatch, George Madden. He was so impressed he offered her a position. She began writing for the paper in 1885, where her pen name, Nellie Bly, was born. Nellie Bly was a reporter during the time new journalism was rising. Journalism was changing, and Nellie Bly was leading that change. She would write exposés from going undercover and involve herself in her stories. She was not an observer of what was happening. Instead, she was experiencing it herself. She went undercover as a sweatshop worker to expose working conditions women faced in factories. But the Pittsburgh Dispatch was losing advertising because women like Nellie Bly were not socially acceptable at the time. The paper would later move her to the social and fashion pages that were deemed appropriate for women to write for. Nellie Bly was not having it. She quit and relocated to New York, where she got a new job, working for the New York World. Her first assignment was to write a piece exposing what was happening at the infamous mental institution Blackwell's Island in New York City. To get herself committed to the island, she gave a compelling performance. She wrote, "I had some faith in my own ability as an actress, and I thought I could assume insanity long enough to accomplish my mission entrusted to me." It proved to be easier than what she had anticipated. She would spend 10 days investigating the asylum, uncovering nurses harassing and abusing patients, and patients that didn't belong here. It was rat-infested and unfit for any human. She wrote in her exposé that insane asylum on Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap. It is easier to get in, but once there, it is impossible to get out. This exposé sparked outrage in the community, and people demanded change. She followed her Blackwell's exposé with similar investigation work. She wrote editorials about the improper treatment of people in New York jails and in factories. She wrote about corruption within the state. She also interviewed and wrote pieces on several prompt figures at the time, including people like Emma Goldman and Susan B. Anthony. At this point, Nellie Bly was famous. She would use her status to travel around the world after the famous book Around the World in 80 Days was published by Jules Vernon. She was told by her editor that only a man could travel around the world and it would be impossible for her to do the task. The 24-year-old woman, who had proven her moxie countless times, response to this was, "Very well. Start the man and I'll start the same day for some other newspaper and beat him." It took a year, but eventually Bly embarked on her adventure in 1889 from Hoboken, New Jersey. She traveled to France, Egypt, Ceylon, Hong Kong, Japan, and China. She completed the trip in 72 days, 6 hours, 11 minutes, and 14 seconds, setting a world record. All this before she had even turned 30. She was worth money now, and she brought readership with her. After the paper refused to pay her more, she resigned. She eventually returned to the paper, though, in 1893, reporting on the same way she used to. In 1895, she married Roger Seaman, who ran the iron glass manufacturing industry. Nellie Bly would later on take on the role of running the company after her husband passes in 1904. The company would eventually go bankrupt, and Nellie Bly would return to what she truly loved, writing. She would continue her investigative reporting, but it wouldn't last long. Nellie Bly met her demise when she turned 57 years old. She contracted pneumonia. She died on January 27, 1922, at St. Mark's Hospital in New York. She would go on to be remembered as one of America's greatest journalists.